So over the offseason, we saw Walker Kessler put in a lot of work, whether he was with the FIBA USA team or in his own time working with his personal shooting coach, Austin Ewing, as well as Jazz assistant coach, Chris Jones. Now, his reasoning for working with both of those individuals specifically was to work on extending his range. We know Walker Kessler shoots extremely well at the rim within 5 feet, within 10 feet even, and he's also a defensive menace inside the paint and particularly under the rim, and he also moves his feet well on the perimeter. That being said, the next step towards advancing his game is going to be him being a viable shooter. Even if he doesn't have extreme three-point range, just being able to shoot a jumper at all presents another opportunity for the Jazz to level up their offensive sets and gives them just a myriad of offensive lineups that they can go to on any game-to-game basis. That being said, last season we saw him take 3 threes. He did end up going 1 for 3, all of which came after the All-Star break, with him hitting his first 3 in the first game after All-Star break. Now, the curious thing about Walker Kessler is that last season you saw more of a catapult motion, and when I say that, I mean essentially when he would bring the ball up, it would come so high that it would end up being behind his head before he would use more of his elbow and arm strength to force the ball forward at the rim, which isn't ideal if you want to be a great shooter, especially at a higher height. But this is an issue that a lot of taller NBA players end up having because they're just so much closer to the rim than, say, like your Steph Currys. That being said, over the summer with Chris, he worked on his footwork, catching the ball and making sure that he can get a stable base that allows him to get a more accurate shot attempt off each time he takes one. And then with Austin, it was more so a thing of him being able to get that touch on the ball, get more wrist action, and put the ball in front of his face as opposed to behind his head. That essentially removes the catapult motion that was laboring him last season, though we only saw it a little bit. And now, so far from what we're understanding from reports about the practices and the runs in team practice and team camp, is that it's working for him. Now, is that to say that he's going to be shooting 3, 4, 5 threes a game? No, of course not. But there are going to be multiple times during this season where opposing teams leave Walker open in a pick and roll situation, or even out on the perimeter after he sets a screen and just rolls off of it or just stays there. And him being able to have a viable jumper, whether it be from the high key of the elbow or whether it be from the top of the key shooting that 3, those opportunities are going to be there. So it would be a shame for him not to take advantage of the opportunities when they present himself, especially considering that there's going to be more mouths to feed on this offense. Obviously, they added John Collins, who seems to be coming back into his own. He looked a lot more comfortable later on in the preseason as opposed to in the very beginning. But you also have Lowry, who's going to need his shots, and depending on what 2 guards they start, they're going to need their shot attempts as well. That being said, it just makes more sense that he rounds out his game as much as possible to get more efficient shot attempts and get a more high quality shot volume that allows him to not only be the menace that can average 2, 3, 4 blocks a night at any point in the season, but also someone that can give you a viable 15 and 15 realistically. And while that is probably unlikely to honestly happen, I would believe that that is something that we could see consistently enough to where it wouldn't be a surprise to us. Similarly to how Russell Westbrook had his run of just getting triple doubles, and then it became so average for him to do it specifically that nobody really paid attention to it anymore. I think Walker Kessler could be that way with a double-double, flirting with those mid-teens in both points and rebounds. And he isn't a terrible passer by any stretch of the imagination either, and depending on how they go with the point guard battle, he might end up averaging 2, maybe even 3 assists, depending on what kind of actions they run on offense and just what kind of sets they decide to run, because it came out that during the preseason they were actually working on different offensive sets and just installing that into their games, because for the Jazz it was an extended training camp, and so Walker seemed to be a little bit sluggish coming up and down the court. He seemed like he didn't really know at times what he was doing or where he was supposed to be, but he made the most of it in the opportunities that he had, and in particular in the most recent game against the Sacramento Kings, though both teams didn't have their entire starting lineups and the ones that they'll actually run when they match up again the first game of the season on the 25th, he still had a very solid outing both offensively and defensively. Now, one thing that we saw specifically that I did want to touch on regarding his shooting, which I did see was very interesting, though he has shot a few attempts during this preseason and only hit 1 of them. I see that his motion is a lot more fluid. Yes, up top it looks a lot more one motion. Obviously, it is still a 2-motion jumper that he has. It's more of a Klay Thompson-esque type jumper than it is going to be ever a Stephen Curry type jumper. Just, I think, off the strength of the fact that he is a 7-footer, and with the wingspan that he has, it's not realistic to expect him to just almost look like he's flinging the ball forward. I don't think that would be conducive to success for him and his particular play style. He's also widened his base out a bit. I did notice that it looks like he's being more intentional, and it looks like he's preparing for the catch, preparing for the ball when it comes his way. He also said in an interview that he would be placing his right foot slightly in front of his left, as opposed to having them dead square even. With that being said, he also needs to make sure that he keeps his knees open instead of having an inward bend, which I think would definitely harm his shot in particular, just because he is a longer and rangier player from a build standpoint, as opposed to a shorter player that might be like 6'4", 6'3", because them having a slight knee bend isn't as significant to what's going to affect their jumper. Their bodies are simply more compact, whereas his is a lot more stretched out. That being said, it wouldn't surprise me if Walker Kessler did end up shooting 2 threes a game. It wouldn't surprise me if he ended up taking a third every now and then. But it's also going to come down to how comfortable he is, and those game reps are going to hit a lot different than they do in practice, and that's going to be where the real progress happens. And in the beginning of the season, I don't expect him to shoot terrifically, but if he picks his spots well, I could see him getting a comfortable amount of open ones that build his confidence, make him more comfortable in the game type setting, and that will really do wonders for the Jazz, particularly when you get past the trade deadline point and you really see what type of team you have and how deep you think you can go in the playoffs. With that being said, thanks for tuning in this video. Let me know what you guys think. Do you feel like Walker Kessler could improve his range, or do you think that it's better that he stays inside the arc with his offensive repertoire? Make sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on those post notifications. And with that being said, good morning, good evening, good night. No matter where you are on the globe watching, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.